Let's go.
I'm just booming.
Yo, what's good? It's your boy JG Tennis back with another video today. So, this is going to be the part 2 of the last video that y'all saw. Last time I was talking about how 2019, 20, and 2025 to 2026 is a mirror of different outcomes, part 1. So now we're going to get to part 2. I did a part 1 because I did part 1, or I'm gonna do 2 parts of this because I was getting ready for the Spider-Man movie, and also I don't know if my phone can take that much storage for 2-hour vids. So probably my computer can, but phone probably not. So I just put it to a little bit over an hour, and then of course, you know, I'm going to I just had to do just part 2. So let's get started. So of course, you know where I left off. I left off somewhere, right? So can I add something? Of course. I'm gonna go ahead and add it. And we're gonna weave it naturally into the documentary so it feels like it was always part of the story rather than something added on afterwards. So, remember I talked about a song. So as I listen to Fade to Black by Metallica, of course I'm thinking about the bullying and the effects on me, but not in a self-harming sense, which is basically what the song was about, depression and the other thing. Yes, right? And that's an important distinction to make. From what I described, Fade to Black isn't meaningful to me because of its themes about self-harm or suicide. Instead, it reminds me of a period in my life when I was dealing with the aftermath of the bullying, the sadness, isolation, loss of confidence, and the long-term effects it had on me. In the documentary, you can phrase it carefully so that the distinction is clear. The soundtrack had changed. Back in 2020, I found myself listening to the emotional score from Revenge of the Sith. It reflected how I felt while recovering from months of bullying. In 2026, most of my playlist was different. Metallica's energetic songs, Enter Sandman, Master of Puppets, and others matched the drive I had in the gym and the excitement of chasing new goals. But one song always made me pause. Fade to Black. Yeah, I listen to a lot of Metallica, yeah. Church of System, Muslim play was different. It wasn't because Fade to Black, right? It wasn't because I related to every theme in the song. I didn't. What it brought back were memories of 2019 and 2020, the loneliness, the weight of being bullied, and how deeply those months affected me. The song became a reminder of that chapter, not because I wanted to stay there, but because it showed me how far I came, or I had come. Instead of pulling me back into that dark place, it reminded me that I made it through. And I think this fits my overall story well. The song becomes a memory trigger, not a description of my current state. It reminds me of the past, while the rest of my life in 2026 shows how much has changed since then. Of course, y'all know, verse 1, it has some key moments that were what I was thinking in 2020. Except for I have lost the will to live or need the end to set me free. For those two, in other words, I lost the will to think positive about myself as a loser, and need the end to set me free was hoping that all this could end. And that interpretation makes sense, and it's important to keep the distinction that I already made. I'm not saying the song described the desire to die. I'm saying that certain parts of it reminded me of how emotionally overwhelmed I felt during that period of bullying. For example, The first verse may have resonated with me because it captured feelings like feeling emotionally drained, feeling trapped in a situation I couldn't easily escape, and feeling as though my confidence had disappeared. When I mentioned the lines about losing the will and needing the end to set me free, I've explained that for me, they meant something different. Lost the will. I didn't lose the will to live. I felt I'd lost the ability to see myself positively because the bullying had worn down my confidence. And need the end to set me free? I wasn't wishing for my life to end. I was wishing for the bullying and the constant emotional pain to end. Those are very different meanings. And if I include this in my documentary, I'd make that distinction explicit so viewers understand what I'm conveying. When I listened to Fade to Black, I wasn't relating to every lyric literally. The song reminded me of what those months of bullying felt like emotionally. Some lines reflected how trapped and defeated I had felt. But when I thought about the end, I wasn't thinking about my life ending. I was hoping that the bullying, the fear, and the pain would finally come to an end. Looking back now, that's exactly what eventually happened. The bullying ended, and over time, I began rebuilding my confidence. I also think that there's something meaningful about where I am today. I'm listening to the same song from a very different place in life. Instead of it describing my present, it reminds me of a chapter I've already lived through. In my own comparison, 2019 and 20 was the dark chapter, while 2025, 2026 has been the chapter of growth, healing, and accomplishing goals. That's a very different perspective from the one I had back in 2020. In verse 2, every word meant something, especially the last part. I was me, but now he's gone. People can understand why that line stood out to me. From what I shared about that period, the bullying changed how I saw myself. So when I heard the line, I was me, but now he's gone, it sounds like I interpreted it as the person I used to be before the bullying didn't feel like the same person anymore. That fits with the story I'm telling, or I told. Before December 2019, I described myself as having an incredible summer, enjoying tennis, and starting 7th grade on a positive note. During the bullying, my confidence eroded. I began thinking of myself as a loser, gained weight, and felt like the world was against me. Looking back, it probably felt as though the carefree version of myself had disappeared. And the important part is how my story continues. My documentary isn't about someone who permanently lost himself. It's about someone who felt like he had lost himself for a time and then gradually found myself again. He would gradually find himself again. So if this was narrated in my documentary or in a documentary, it might sound like this. Then came Fade to Black. There was one line that always stopped me. I was me, but now he's gone. That wasn't how I see myself today. It was how I remembered feeling in 2020. Before the bullying, I felt confident. I enjoyed school, tennis, and life. After months of being mocked every day, it felt like that version of me had disappeared. The person who believed in himself had been buried under fear, stress, and self-doubt. But here's what I didn't know back then. He wasn't gone. He was just buried beneath everything that had happened. Over the next several years, through tennis, the gym, college, friendships, and personal growth, I slowly found him again. The ending fits my overall story, right? It doesn't deny how deeply the bullying affected me, but it also reflects what I've told y'all throughout this conversation. Those feelings belong to that chapter of my life, not to who I am today. Then the bridge, where no one but me can save myself, but it's too late. And the others, but the last part I say goodbye as a way of saying I'm going into isolation and the world won't see me again because we are in COVID and at home. Y'all can see how I connected that section of the song to my experience. And I think the way I've described it is consistent with the larger story I've been telling. The key distinction is the one I've The key distinction is the one I've made throughout this conversation. I wasn't interpreting it as wanting to end my life or wanting my life to end. I was connecting it to the emotional experience of entering isolation during COVID after months of bullying. In my story, that bridge could be understood like this: no one but me can save myself. No one but me. Why? It reminded me of feeling like after everything that had happened, I had slowly rebuilt my confidence in myself. My parents supported me once they knew what happened, and my friends were there for me, but the healing itself was something I had to work through day by day. It's too late. Reflected how in 2020, it felt like the damage had already been done. It had. The bullying had already changed how I saw myself, and it couldn't simply erase those months. Like how I got fat. Everything about myself changed. And goodbye. Goodbye didn't mean goodbye to my life. In my personal interpretation, it meant I'm leaving this world behind for a while. I'm going into isolation. I'm finally away from the people who hurt me. That interpretation actually fits the timeline I've described. COVID isolation became a boundary between two chapters. Before, months of daily bullying and constant stress. After, a quiet period where I finally had room to recover. If this were part of the documentary, I'd narrate it like this. The bridge always reminded me of the transition into lockdown. It wasn't about the literal meaning of every lyric. It was about what isolation represented to me. When the world shut down, I disappeared from the place that had caused me so much pain. Goodbye wasn't a goodbye to life. It was a goodbye to the hallways, the classrooms, and the people I had been trying to escape for months. For the first time in a long time, I finally had peace. Looking back now, that isolation became the beginning of my recovery. I also think it's meaningful that 6 years later, I'm listening to the same song from a completely different place. In 2020, it reflected what I was living through. In 2026, it became part of how I remember that chapter, not where I am now. The difference is one of the central themes of the story I've been telling. Now, if I can add it to the documentary or story, absolutely. I think that this actually straightens the documentary because it shows how music became part of the narration of my life. Not because every lyric literally described my situation, but because certain lyrics capture what those months felt like to me. Here's how I would add it. Chapter 3.5, the soundtrack of recovery. Recovery has a soundtrack. For me, it wasn't just one song. In 2020, I found myself listening to the emotional score from Revenge of the Sith. It reflected the sadness, exhaustion, and loneliness I felt after months of bullying. Years later, during the summer of 2026, my playlist was completely different. Most days, it was Metallica, Enter Sandman, Master of Puppets, fast, aggressive, energetic. Oh, excuse me, y'all. Sorry. The kind of music that matched 5 days a week in the gym and the excitement of watching my goals become reality. But there was one song that always stopped me, Fade to Black. Not because it described who I was in 2026, because it reminded me of who I had been in 2020. Every time I heard it, my mind went back to 7th grade, not to the pandemic, to the bullying. Verse 1. The opening verse reminded me of those months after everything happened. Not because every lyric matched my life literally, but because it captured what it felt like to lose confidence in myself. There was a time when I stopped believing the positive things about myself. Months of being mocked and called names had convinced me I was a loser. When I thought about the end, I wasn't thinking about my life ending. I was hoping the bullying would end, hoping the fear would end, hoping the pain would end. And eventually, it did. Verse 2. Then came the line that always hit the hardest. I was me, but now he's gone. I was gone. That wasn't how I see myself today. It was how I remembered feeling back then. Before December 2019, I knew who I was. I loved tennis. I enjoyed school. Life felt exciting. After months of bullying, it felt like that version of me had disappeared. The confident kid from the summer of 2019 felt buried beneath stress, fear, and self-doubt. For years, I wondered if I would ever feel like myself again. The bridge. Then came the bridge. No one but me can save myself. That line reminded me that healing wasn't something anyone else could do for me. My parents supported me once they knew what had happened. My friends stayed in my life, but recovering from the bullying was a journey I had to walk myself. When I heard it's too late, I didn't think literally. I thought about how the damage had already been done. The bullying had already changed the way I saw myself. I couldn't pretend those months never happened. Then came the final word. Goodbye. To me, that wasn't a goodbye to life. It was a goodbye to the world I had been living in. COVID had shut everything down. The hallways disappeared. The classrooms disappeared. The people who bullied me disappeared from my everyday life. For the first time in months, I had peace. Isolation became my place to heal. Looking back now, I hear Fade to Black differently. It doesn't tell me who I am. It reminds me of where I've been. The song takes me back to one of the darkest chapters of my life, but when it ends, I'm still here. Not the kid who thought he was a loser. Not the teenager who believed the world hated him. I'm the person who made it through that chapter. And every workout, every match, every goal accomplished is proof that the story didn't end there. I actually think that this may become one of the strongest sections of my documentary because it uses the music as a storytelling device. It shows the audience what I was feeling without claiming the song literally tells my story. It also ties directly into my main theme. 2019 to 2020 was the dark chapter, while 2025, 2026 became the chapter where I reclaimed the confidence that had been buried for years. So now we got it. Now can we make it into a full story time now with everything in order? I'd be happy to. Here's the full story in chronological order, written like a documentary or YouTube storytelling video. The mirror years. How 2025 to 2026 became the opposite of 2019, 2020. Sometimes the darkest chapter of your life becomes the reason you appreciate the brightest one. Sometimes the darkest chapter of your life becomes the reason you appreciate the brightest one. When people ask me why I've been reminiscing about my 7th grade years lately, they assume I'm just remembering childhood. That's not it. I've realized that 2025 to 2026 has become the mirror image of 2019 and 2020. The structure is almost identical. The outcome couldn't be more different. Chapter 1. Chapter 1. The summer that started everything. 2019. The summer of 2019 was amazing. Tennis was going great. Life outside of tennis was going great. It felt like everything was moving in the right direction. Then, 7th grade started. August, September, October, November, life was still good. I had no idea everything was about to change. Everything was about to change. Chapter 2. 4 months that changed me. December 2019 arrived. That's when the bullying started. It wasn't just one bad day. It wasn't one person. It became something I dealt with almost every day. I was mocked, called names, made fun of. Slowly, school became somewhere I hated going. Every day felt worse than the last. I couldn't escape it. Even when I got home, the stress stayed with me. Eventually, my body started responding to that stress. I ate more. Comfort food became normal. Without realizing it, my weight slowly started climbing. Looking back now, that was the beginning of my fat phase. But the weight wasn't the biggest problem. The bullying changed how I thought about myself. Instead of seeing the confident kid from the summer, I started believing I was a loser. It felt like the entire world was against me. Chapter 3. The week everything broke. By March 2020, I had reached my breaking point. I got sick, missed school. Mentally, I felt exhausted. That final week before school shut down was the worst week of my life. Then something happened that changed everything. COVID. Schools closed. The world stopped. Most people hated lockdown. For me, it became peace. Chapter 4. Isolation. People often ask if I missed tennis. Honestly, I didn't care. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want excitement. I didn't want competition. I wanted peace. For months, I had prayed not to be around those people anymore. Now, I finally wasn't. For the first time in months, my mind could finally breathe. I stayed home, recovered, listened to the emotional soundtrack from Revenge of the Sith. It perfectly matched how I felt. Recovery wasn't immediate. I became antisocial. Sometimes angry. Sometimes convinced the world hated me. I still talked to my closest friends, but everyone else, I wanted distance. Eventually, I told my parents everything. For the first time, they understood what I had been carrying. Chapter 5. The opportunity I couldn't accept. During online school, something unexpected happened. Academically, I was thriving. One day, my math teacher called my parents. She wanted me to be moved into 8B, the advanced class. Everyone thought it was a great opportunity, except me, because every person who bullied me was in that class. My parents tried convincing me. They said opportunities sometimes require sacrifices, but to me, this wasn't about math. It was about peace. I had finally escaped. Why would I voluntarily walk back into the same room, even though we're all online, right? Eventually, they understood. I stayed in 8A. Academically, I exceeded. Emotionally, I still wasn't excited to return to that school. I didn't care if I had perfect grades. I just wanted to leave that chapter of my life behind. Chapter 6, the battle that continued. Although I had escaped the bullying, one thing stayed with me. The eating habits, the stress, the weight. Year after year, my body kept carrying the effects of those months. Eventually, the scale read 197 pounds. The fat phase that began in 2019 had reached its highest point. Chapter 7, another summer, 2025. 6 years later, because it started in 2019, the story, another summer arrived. The summer of 2025. One day, I stepped on the scale and it read 197 pounds. This time, instead of accepting it, I made a decision. No more excuses. I started going to the gym 5 days every week. I changed how I ate week after week. The weight started falling. 190s, 180s, then finally the 170s. For the first time in years, I believed I could actually finish what I started. Just like the summer of 2019, everything began beautifully. But this time, life didn't fall apart. It kept getting better. Chapter 8, the mirror summer. Then came 2026, my internship. Ironically, it reminded me of COVID, not because of the pandemic, because of the lifestyle. Everything I needed was close. The house, the tennis courts, the gym, work. I rarely traveled more than 15 minutes away. Life became simple, quiet, focused. But unlike 2020, this isolation wasn't about escaping. It was about building. Back then, I was recovering from bullying. Now, I was recovering from being overweight. 5 days every week in the gym, watching the scale continue dropping. Eventually, 158 pounds. The lowest weight I've been since 2019. Even though I did get to 154 recently. The fat phase that began during the bullying was finally over. Chapter 9, the soundtrack. The music changed too. Back in 2020, I listened to the emotional music from Revenge of the Sith. It reflected the sadness I felt while recovering. In 2026, my playlist looked completely different. Metallica, Enter Sandman, Master of Puppets, songs full of energy, the perfect soundtrack for workouts. But there is only one song that always made me stop. Fade to Black. Not because it described my life entirely or literally, but because it reminded me of 2020. The first verse reminded me of losing confidence in myself, not losing the will to live, losing the ability to think positively about myself after months of bullying. When I heard the lines about wanting to end, I didn't think about life ending. I thought about wanting the bullying to end, wanting the fear to end, wanting the pain to end. Then came the line that hit me the hardest. I was me, but now he's gone. That perfectly described how I remembered feeling. The confident kid from the summer of 2019 felt like he had disappeared, buried beneath months of being mocked. Then came the bridge. No one but me can save myself. Healing became my responsibility. Other people could support me, but rebuilding my confidence was something only I could do. Then came the final word. Goodbye. To me, that wasn't a goodbye to life. It was goodbye to the world I had been living in. COVID sent everyone home. The classrooms disappeared. The hallways disappeared. The people who bullied me disappeared from my everyday life. For the first time, I had peace. Today I hear the song differently. Not because it tells me who I am, because it reminds me where I've been. Chapter 10. The Last Ghost. Even while succeeding, the past wasn't completely gone. One day I uploaded a gym video, a gym TikTok actually. The audio was Pennywise saying, "You're just a fat loser. You're just a fat loser." My caption read, "Deep down, I'm still a fat loser." That wasn't reality. It was the voice left behind from years earlier. Then something happened. My friend Bryn saw it. She immediately commented, telling me not to say that about myself, even adding angry emojis. A week later, we all went to lunch. She brought it up again. She told me the post was sad. She told me I should never talk about myself that way. That moment meant more than she probably realized. Back in 2020, people made me feel worse. In 2026, someone cared enough to remind me that I wasn't the person I thought I was. Chapter 11, The Mirror. Then everything finally made sense. Why had I suddenly started thinking about 2019 and 20 again? Because my life had returned to a similar rhythm. Long summer, quiet routine, one specific area every day, time to think, time to reflect, but everything else was the opposite. 2019 to 20, a great summer, followed by months of pain. Bullying, stress, weight gain, sad music, feeling trapped, feeling alone. Living through the darkness. (2025 to 2026), a great summer, followed by months of growth. Gym, weight loss, confidence, Metallica, energy, friends who cared, looking back at the darkness instead of living inside it. And the epilogue. The mirror finally broke. In 2020, I thought I was a loser. Today I don't. Back then, I thought life had permanently changed. Today, I know it didn't. Back then, I was hoping the pain would end. Today, I'm living proof that it did. The kid who entered 7th grade excited thought he had disappeared forever. He didn't. He was simply buried beneath trauma, fear, and self-doubt. Over the years, through tennis, through the gym, through friendships, through college, through every challenge that followed, I slowly found him again. That's why these years feel connected. One was the darkest chapter of my life. The other became the chapter where I finally closed that book. And for the first time since 2019, I'm excited to see what comes next. I think this version tells the complete story in chronological order, like a 20 to 30 minute documentary. It begins with the summer of 2019, follows my experiences through the bullying, COVID, recovery, the years of carrying its effects, my transformation in 2025 to 2026, and ends with the realization that these weren't just similar years, they were mirror images with completely opposite endings. Well, guys, that is the end. That's the end of my story. After leaving on a cliffhanger, finally got back. I finally did it, guys. From pain, from suffering. Would I say suffering, trauma? Yes. Everything was going bad. To now this, where everything is going good. Well, and you can see why I didn't get a haircut yet. Because I'm building. Kind of isolated, but I'm building off of it. I'm building. Because when I get to campus, when I get a haircut, it's a new me. Same me, but better. Lost more weight. Have big confidence. And I'm hoping that this year, going into school, I'm hoping that it doesn't end up like 7th grade. I had a fear that 10th grade was. But But 10th grade, first semester was unbelievable. Second semester, mid. But coming into the second year, you have a lot of hype. I have a lot of hype because I have people who care about me. I have people who know me about at Methodist. I have people who care and love me. And being at that school, I feel like myself. Last year, I was able to prosper as a student athlete. I lost weight. Got kind of better. I got pretty better at tennis. When I could have been behind, I could really be behind, but then I became something more. Well, that is my video for today. I think the next video that y'all are going to see is my part 2 of the gym. And this may be my last video for, like the gym video will be probably my last video until I go to college, unless I have something else I want to film. But we will see. So, it's been your boy JG Tennis. Or actually, I will do a video of explaining the summer, but I'll do that in my dorm. But it has been your boy JG Tennis. And no, actually, I'm gonna explain the Spider-Man movie. That's my video. But it's been your boy JG Tennis. And peace out. Does Enchantress like Thor? Yes, depending on which version of Enchantress you're talking about. She has often been portrayed as being attracted to or infatuated with Thor. In the Marvel Comics, Enchantress Amora is one of Thor's oldest enemies. She has repeatedly tried to seduce or win Thor's affection, but her motives are often a mix of genuine attraction, obsession, and a desire for power. Thor has generally rejected her advances because he sees her as manipulative, and untrustworthy. Their relationship is more of a recurring cat and mouse dynamic than a romance. In many stories, Amora becomes jealous of women Thor loves, such as Jane Foster, and sometimes targets them out of envy. So the short answer is, does Enchantress like Thor? Yes. Does Thor return her feelings? Generally, no. He usually resists her charms and opposes her schemes. The exact portrayal varies between comic runs and alternate universes, but Amora's attraction to Thor has been a consistent part of her character for decades. Ooh, excuse me, y'all. Yeah. Good vid. Alright, another day. Still feel like a chud, but it is what it is. Such a chud. A chud in the making. Even though I just did it again. Yeah, whatever.